as a result of you rowing the Pacific a few years ago with some in a team, you did you decide? Did you think I'm going to go out and look for speaking opportunities, or was it something that people started asking you to do to come and talk to their teams or groups or whatever about your experience?
Yeah, that's been a really interesting journey in itself. So I was in the travel industry. I was always based in destination. So I'd been living and working in different countries for about 14 years. And in fact, it was only the preparation for the row that brought me back to the UK. And I prepared for the row. It took about 11 months, and then rode the Pacific 9 months, and then came back to the UK. And I felt like I'd put my parents under so much pressure and stress, and I'd been away for so long that it was time to spend a little bit more quality time with my parents. They were based in the UK, so I decided I was going to stay rooted in the UK for a little while. And that meant for me not going back into the travel industry, because for me, travel industry was always somewhere else. It was always in destinations. So I didn't really know what I was going to do after the row. I'd had this incredibly strong focus for many months, that had then been taken away. So I needed to just stop and reflect and think about what I was going to do next. And while we were preparing for the expedition, we would do these fundraising events where maybe 3 or 4 of us would get together, and we would talk to a group of people, and we would explain what we were going to do. And because we had no idea what the expedition was going to be, but it was the plans for the expedition, and we could still introduce Doris the boat. And at the end of these events, people would come up to me and they would say, wow, you're a really good speaker. And so when I came back from the row, I thought, why don't I maybe try and give this speaking thing a go? If people seem to think that I have a particular talent for it. And I actually had an opportunity that came to me where I'd just come back from the expedition, and they asked me to come in and speak to their team. So it was a corporate company. It was a friend who owned the company, who was the managing director, and he said, I'd love you to just come and talk about teamwork, about resilience. We're going through a hard time at the moment. You could just share your story on what you did and the expedition. That would be great. So that's where it started from. And I spent a little bit of time. I sat down, I thought about the journey. I thought about some of the biggest lessons that I felt I learned from those 9 months and that oceanic odyssey. And I put them together in a 45-minute talk, because I thought that sounds like a good amount of time. I did a little bit of research online to find out what is a good amount of time for a speech, to keep people's attention. And that's really how it started. And 4 years later, this is what I'm doing. And I never imagined that I would become an international inspirational speaker. And I say inspirational speaker instead of motivational speaker, because at the end of the talks, the most commonly used words that people would say would be inspiration or inspirational, or that was so inspirational, or that story has given me such inspiration to go out and to do this. And so I decided that that was the word I wanted to attach to the speaking, rather than motivational. And yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. I never had any help. I crafted the talk myself. I weaved in different stories. I used the images from the rows. So um, I was I love photography and capturing images. And we actually had a documentary made about our row, which is on Amazon and iTunes now. It was on Netflix actually for 3 years. And I was director of photography for the documentary. So I would always capture images. And so I decided just to use these beautiful images that we had from the journey, incorporate all of the learnings that I had getting to the start line and crossing the ocean. And And it was just unbelievably transferable. And so that's what I did. And that's what I'm doing. And I love sharing the stories. And the main tagline that we have is that we may have crossed our literal Pacific, but everyone has their own Pacific to cross. And I truly believe that, I'm not expecting members of the audience to go out and row across an ocean after they've heard me speak. It's more listening to the challenges that we went through as a team and having them look at things in a different perspective and think about what their personal challenges are that they're going through, and relating some of the tips and the tools that we use to help us get through those challenges to help them get through their own challenge. And yeah, I've loved it.
So I'm picking up something in what you're saying, but also in what you're doing while you're talking, and the sort of energy that's coming from you while you're talking. And what I'm guessing is that, that person who came up to you and said, that it was inspiring, and she really loved it and so on, and the feedback that you get isn't about the content of the stories. It's not about what you did, but there's something in the way that you tell those stories that connects with people, that shares your energy with them, that brings those stories to life. So what is it that you think you are adding to those stories that create that relationship with the audience?
I don't know if I have the answer to that. I suppose it would be the audience that would maybe better be able to answer the question. I think the one way I've always tried to live my life is by being 100% me. So I've never tried to be anything that I'm not. And I think authenticity is it's one of my values, and I live by it. And I think it's also a really wonderful way to connect with others when you're being completely yourself. I think you have a way of connecting. I think the fact that I'm a very ordinary person, I wasn't an athlete, I'm not a celebrity, I'm just this average height, 5'4", dark haired woman, very average in many ways. And I share this extraordinary story of a team of, 6 women who really had never done anything out of the ordinary before this particular expedition. And the fact that we came together and we worked together and we accomplished something so unusual, I possibly feel that that gives other people hope. So when they see me standing on a stage, they think, wow, she really is so normal. If she can do that, then I can dot, 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 dot. And I think that's really what I'm hoping to achieve by sharing the story, as well as giving some of the practical tips that helped us deal with the challenges, is that anyone can go out there and do something extraordinary. And that's really what I'm hoping to share. I believe that we can all have amazing lives. We just need to choose to have them. We need to know what we want, and then we need to go out there and grab those opportunities. And it's all about grabbing opportunities at the end of the day, and not being afraid to take that leap of faith. And whether it's inspiring someone to maybe go out there and do something that they've never done before, then for me, that's the first step. And it's just about taking that first step and then seeing where it leads you.
I think you just showed this in action, because you started to talk about the what the journey was, the boat and the rowing and so on, but you didn't just say, I rowed across the Pacific in a boat and team of 6 women. You talked about it in a way that brought it more to life, and then you went on to add some meaning, some lessons. So I felt that what I got there was a little bit of your a talk that you might give to these audiences. And so that's giving me the impression that there's something that is so important for you to share that it's woven into all the stories that you would tell somehow. And it's what creates the connection with the audience, and creates the energy and that sense of being inspired. So thinking about all the different things that you could say about your adventure, what is it that compels you to say the things that you do say about it? To condense 9 months into 45 minutes. Clearly there's some editing going on. So why is it those things that you share?
Because I feel that they were the most powerful parts of that journey.
What do
So
you mean by powerful?
by powerful, for me, connection is one of the most important things in life. There's human connection, which is the energy that you get from people, by sharing someone's stories. I love to catalyze conversations and make people stop and think about what life truly means to them. I've always loved that. I think so. I began my career in the travel industry leading adventure tours. So they would be anything from 2 week to 5 week tours through a various range of different destinations. But because I was with these people for very intense periods of time, I really love to get to know people, to get into deep conversations. That's something that I've always really enjoyed. So that connection. And then for me, also a big part of the travel is the different destinations that you're traveling through, the cultures, the landscapes. And so for me, connection is also to an environment that you're in, and then connecting to yourself. So I've always been fascinated with the mind, and why we are the way that we are, why we think the way that we think.
So
And
so if I can interrupt you there, who was
yeah.
it when you were in your formative years, when you were a child, when you were growing up, who was it that you felt that you either had or you wanted that strongest sense of connection with?
mm, I just loved connecting with everyone that was around me, to be honest. I liked being in big groups of friends, but I also much preferred the one-on-one. So even if I was out with lots of friends when I was younger, I would always gravitate to one person and have a more intimate conversation, and then another person and have a more intimate conversation. I really liked getting to know people on a much deeper level.
And if
Um,
you know somebody
I
on a deeper level, what does that give you?
Just a better understanding of them as a person, why
What do
they
you do with
are
that?
the way they are, why
Do
they
with that
react.
understanding?
Hey?
So what do you do with that understanding, or what do you need to be able to do with that understanding?
I suppose connect even deeper. It's
Because the impression I'm getting is that your adventure was rowing across the Pacific, which a lot of corporate audiences and groups and schools and so on are going to think, wow, that sounds amazing. We want to have a come and talk about that. But actually, if your experience had been, I don't know, 9 months of working in a factory, you would have talked about it in the same way. It's just less, it's maybe a harder sell on
yeah.
the corporate speaking circuit. Here's my adventures working in the warehouse at Amazon or something. Seems to be a
Exactly.
hard, it's a
Yeah,
harder
definitely a
sell
harder sell.
than when you do something that makes you very different to the majority of people. Only because hardly anybody's rowed across the Pacific, statistically.
Yeah,
So I'm
well, I
getting the
suppose it
impression
also
that
gives
any
you
life
an
story you would look for that connection, and you want to share that with other people as a way of getting a connection with them. So the story, in a way, is a means to an end. It's a means to you being able to make the connection, and that's why working, as you say, one to one or with an intimate audience, or with at least face to face with an audience,
yeah.
is so much better for you than working over this sort of medium.
I mean, listen, we're adapting. I think everyone's adapting. For me, I definitely feed off the energy of people, but I'm also I love hugging. I'm such a hugger. And a really unexpected bonus that came from becoming a speaker was that I would go and I would do these talks, and then I would get to hug everyone, as many people as possible. I literally could just hug a whole audience quite happily. And that's something that I'm really missing during this pandemic. I mean, I haven't even hugged my parents. I've been so concerned about shielding them. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I mean, that you can connect in many different ways. And I think technology is improving actually, even now as we speak. I know that they're working on, figuring out that we can look at the camera, but it can also look like we're looking at the person on the screen, and they're making things a lot better for us to deal with in this virtual world. But um I think also I've been very fortunate. I've seen so much beauty in the world, and I think the world is an incredible place filled with incredible people and mind-blowing experiences to have. And I want people to experience that and go out there and have no fear to lead the life that they want to lead,
Well, I
I think.
suspect that that focus and that joy that you get from that, I suspect that that makes you the kind of person who other people really want to be around.
I think we all have our moments, don't
Draw
we?
draws, like you say, people coming up to you at the end of one of your talks, and wanting to be around you and wanting more of that energy, because as we were talking about previously, a lot of people maybe find it difficult to stay positive, especially with what's going on at the moment, worry and working from home and anxiety and all of that.
Yeah,
So
and I mean, don't get me wrong. It's been a roller coaster ride for sure, during the last 9 months. I think everyone's been on a journey, and we all, that's what life is. It's like, the life is the ocean. There's ebbs and flows and ups and downs, and there's moments of confusion and moments of fury and moments of peace and calm and everything in between. And
well, it seems that through that roller coaster, through the ebbs and flows, as you put it, you're able to connect with people, whether it's on a low and sharing that moment or that experience with somebody, or whether it's on a high. You would prefer a high, but creating that intimacy is not just about being happy and positive all the time, but about connecting with people across all of those different levels. So it seems that something that's driving you is creating intimacy, which leads to ultimately a hug, and for you to feel safe and for you to feel loved, and to share that with others. And so
yeah,
the
and
story
interestingly,
of the road gives you a means to do that, but I'm pretty sure you would use any experience in your life in the same way.
yeah, but and I think what's also fascinating is that it's definitely the lows that people choose to share, more often than the highs. So I think because I tend to close my talks, leaving everyone thinking about what their Pacific is, perhaps that's the reason why people will connect with me afterwards and they'll share what their Pacific is, what their challenge is that they're going through at the moment. And maybe by knowing that I've experienced that particular challenge, as in my literal Pacific, they feel like they can open up and share theirs. And that's something that we really try to encourage actually while we were out on the ocean, was for people to know that, everyone is going through something. And that was we had this safe space where they could write in and they could share what their challenges were. Um, and I think you're right, and that's what we mentioned right at the beginning of the chat, wasn't it? Is knowing that there is that safe space to be able to feel those emotions and those sensations that are arising. And yeah, I think that's
It
something
seems
that
that what a lot of people do in order to create that safe space is retreat and be
mm,
by themselves. And it seems what you do is you get closer into the people that you're with. It's like you create safety by getting right in the middle, both emotionally and physically, I guess, as well. And being and connecting with people and building that trust in those relationships. It seems
Mm.
that that's how you're creating that sense of emotional safety for you, by building that intimacy and trust, getting right in there closely with people. Would you, does that seem to fit?
Yeah, and maybe that comes from the, the work that I've always done, where if I, as I mentioned, I started leading tours, and I've always, I suppose what's happened over the years, and if I look about all the different types of work that I've had, it's always been very intensive work, and forming relationships very quickly and deeply with people. So when I was leading the tours, it was these 2 weeks of intense, moving every day, 24-hour days with the same people. I managed a safari lodge in Tanzania, and that was being, on the property 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The team that I had, obviously, we were living very closely with one another. The customers that came, they would come and normally spend 3 or 4 days at the lodge, and again, they were very intimate settings, and you get to know people quite quickly and deeply. I worked in the super yacht industry, so I was working on boats where you have a crew of maybe 10 people, and again, you're literally living in each other's space, so you get to know each other really well. So I'm quite used to developing relationships very quickly with people, and maybe that's why I go deep quite quickly as well. And I love that. I don't know, for me that works really well.
Yeah,
Maybe, well,
that
that's what
seems
I'm
to be
trying to
the
do in my 45-minute talk, is just try and connect and share as much of myself with the audience as I can, to allow them to feel confident enough to share a bit with me, or to go home and share something with whoever they're with, and just to sort of open up. I think it's about opening at the end of the day, isn't it?
So that's interesting, because I started off wondering if for you the challenge of working online versus face to face was about not being there with the audience, present with them, getting that energy, however you get that, whatever you're seeing, hearing. But I'm
Mm,
starting to get the impression it's not about that. It's about what happens afterwards, possibly before, but also what happens afterwards. That when you're delivering your talk via Zoom or Teams or whatever, at the end of it, the host said, "Well, thanks very much, Natalia, that was great," and you sign off and that's it. Whereas when you're face to face, people hang around, they talk, they hug, they share back to you, and I'm wondering if that's the real driver for you. It isn't about the interaction that's happening while you're delivering your talk, it's what happens afterwards and you
yeah.
getting that feedback from them afterwards.
Yeah, that I think there's a huge element of that, and it happens in a certain um, way with the virtual experience as well. It would just be more people would reach out on email
Mm.
or social media or LinkedIn, and the connection could happen that way. It's
Yeah,
not quite the same as the face to face, because you obviously, yeah, as we
they
know,
have
there's
to make more of an effort to do it, whereas
yeah.
if somebody's there in the room, and I've spoken at conferences, and at the end inevitably people want to come up and talk about the relevance to them and so on, so it's far more easier, more spontaneous.
Yeah, I don't know. I think people are surprisingly more open in a virtual world. I think sometimes it's easier for people, especially if there's a chat function and they can just type something in and they don't have to be that vulnerable, and unmute themselves and actually say something. That there's quite a lot of sharing that can happen.
Mm.
And I think as we become more adaptable to it, I think there's positives and negatives. I think, like everything in life, there's
When
positives and
those people are sharing back to you, whether it's at the end of an in-person talk where they're coming up and talking about how you've inspired them, or giving you a hug, or whether they're sending you an email afterwards, what is it that you are interpreting their connection, their feedback as? How is that coming across to you?
that they've had a shift in, they've had some small shift in whether it's their perspective on how they see things, whether it's a challenge that they're facing and they maybe have slightly more renewed energy to go out there and deal with it, whether they know that there's a change they want to happen in their lives and they now feel that they have slightly more confidence to go out there and make that change. That for me is the best feedback that I could ever hope
What
for.
what is the importance or the value for you of knowing that it's you that's inspired them to do that and to say that to you?
I don't I don't necessarily care whether it's me. I just want them to have had that
Well,
shift in
logically, you must know
perspective.
that it is you. They're not coming up and saying, "Oh, I
Yeah,
feel great
no,
right
no,
now. I'm
and that's
feeling well."
wonderful. But it's for me, it's just I want people to live their best lives. I want everyone to. I mean, I know it's an unrealistic hope, but I want everyone to feel love and happiness and compassion and kindness and excitement for life and for the world and for the opportunities that are out there and for making connections with other people. And I want everyone to be happy, really.
So
That's what I want.
if you're right, so if you're able to influence the people around you to be happy, to love life, to get more out of life, to be positive and joyful and enthusiastic as you are, if you're able to influence the people around you to feel all of that and to achieve all of that, what does that make you?
What does that make me? Mm, I don't know. What does it make me? A catalyst, maybe? Just something to, just like a, when you strike a match, just that little spark, possibly. That little spark. Because sometimes you just need that beginning, don't you?
And who does that make you? If you're the person inspiring other people to feel and act like that and to live their lives in that way, who do you become?
I don't, I don't know how to answer that. um,
Because if you concentrate on the feeling, if you imagine those people around you being inspired, picking up that spark that you've created for them, being that catalyst, if you imagine yourself surrounded by those people who are now living in that wonderful, joyful way as a result of you inspiring them, then that feeling that gives you, what does that remind you of? Who have you become by achieving that?
I suppose I've just become more of who I am in a way.
Right. Yeah.
I am a little bit of an empath as well. I pick up on other people's feelings and emotions
Yeah,
and
it's nice being around happy people, and
yeah, and
if
I'm
you
not
make them
saying that we
happy,
should
then
all be
it's
happy all
all
the time. That's not realistic. Especially over the last 9 months. It's definitely, but I just think, yeah, coming back to that control the controllable, the one thing we can control is how we choose to deal with situations, and we can choose the attitude that we go out there with in the world. And if you go out there and you smile at people, and I think that's another thing that travel taught me. I would be walking the streets and I'd just be smiling at everyone and they would smile back, and it was wonderful. And what you give out quite often will come back to you, and not necessarily always. I remember I'd just come back from a contract leading tours in Egypt, Israel and Jordan. And I came back and I was in London and I was, being really happy and I was smiling at everyone. I was on the underground in London and I was smiling at this guy and he just turned around and he looked at me with this scowl on his face and he basically just put his hand up and like gave me like the finger, looked me straight in the eye with this really evil look. And I just was like, oh, and I was with my brother at the time. And I remember turning around to my brother and going, oh my God, that guy just swore at me because I was smiling at him. And he said, well, you have no idea what kind of day he's having. Maybe he's having a really bad day. And here's some crazy woman smiling at him. And I just thought, I'm not going to let that deter me or put me off. I'm going to keep going out there and just smiling at people and just trying to transfer, the most positive energy that I can. And that's what I've kept on doing. And it's amazing, if you do try that, you go out and you smile at people, quite often they will smile back. They'll just reflect back what you're emanating. And I think life's too short to be miserable, quite honestly. I think that's what it boils down to. One, life is fragile. We have no idea what is going to happen tomorrow. And it's too short to be miserable. So why not just be as positive as we can be and live the life that we want to live and live each moment, really. And that's what I try and do as much as I can.
Well, just to summarize that, then I think I'm picking up two things from that. Firstly, that as you said about when you're on the boat and sort of dealing with the monotony of it, you're literally creating your reality. Because if you're smiling, you're encouraging the people around you to smile. You feel better because they're smiling at you, and you're literally creating reality through your interactions with the people around you. You can't change the trees and the buildings, but you can change how people interact with you. And the second thing, coming back to your point about authenticity, and getting that validation and getting that stronger sense of authenticity, being more of who you are, I'm getting a sense that something that's really driving you through all of this is is reinforcing the knowledge that who you are is more than enough.
Yeah, and
Who you
that
are
is
is more than
really,
good enough for anything
yeah. And
and
I
for
mean,
anyone.
if that's what you're picking up on, that without a doubt would be the message that I would want everyone to hear and to take away. Because, you know, we are all good enough and we are all exactly where we're supposed to be. We've just got to be there and embrace it, and yeah,
That's
yeah,
a perfect message to end on. Thank you.
yeah. Well, that's lovely that you picked up on that message. Thank you.